Hello, everyone. Welcome to the best webinar about remote work that you will attend in 2020. We're going to give it just about another minute for everybody to arrive. I'm going to share my screen just with a casual little intro slide so that you all know that you're in the right place at the right time. Otherwise, everyone get comfortable, grab a cup of coffee or tea or water, whatever you feel like your soul needs today, and we'll get started in just a moment. Christy's asking a question in the chat about whether or not this will be recorded. Yes, it will be recorded. So take it easy. If there's an interruption from the dog or the mailman or the child or the spouse or a roommate or whatever, you're in a safe place. We all understand. All right, let's go ahead and get started. It's 12:02 Eastern time. And you know, as we all know in remote work land, that's late. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Sorry for the awkwardness there. And welcome our panelists. We have such a great conversation to be happening today. But first, we want to thank our hosts here at Beeble. They are an amazing product with an amazing team that really advocates for the good side of remote work. We've all seen so much hypergrowth in this conversation this year, and a lot of people just opportunistically really trying to capitalize on remote work. And we as longtime advocates that's a bittersweet process for us to observe, but not the folks at Beeble. We are so excited to have this opportunity from them. So Helen, would you mind jumping on and introducing your team and all of the good stuff that you guys are doing at Beeble?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Laurel, and thank you to our panelists, and thank you to everybody else for joining us today. The holidays are upon us, and I know that we're also all a little bit webinared out this year, so we really appreciate you all making the time, and we tried really hard to ensure that today's going to be full of a lot of practical, applicable advice so that you can really get the most value possible out of this next hour. So I know that some of you are already Beeble customers, welcome, but for those of you who aren't familiar with us, I just wanted to offer a little bit of an introduction and kind of explain why we wanted to put together today's event. So Beeble is an employee time management tool. We offer timesheets, mobile time tracking, project management, reports. In the coming months, we're going to be adding a lot of features like scheduling, resource management, etc. But more importantly, or I guess more significantly in terms of today's conversation, Beeble is and always has been, since we were founded in 2008, a fully distributed team. So we're located in the United States and in Europe. I'm coming to you from my tiny home office in the Canary Islands, which I highly recommend to anybody who's maybe working remotely and looking for a change of scenery. And obviously there are a ton of resources out there for remote teams already. But essentially what we wanted to do today is kind of emphasize how managers can try and make remote work sustainable and efficient and effective in the long term. You know, so a lot of companies have had to transition to remote this year, but I think that in order for it to be truly effective, it needs to be about more than putting a Band-Aid on problems and more about just trying to sort of apply your office leadership to Zoom calls, right? So I think that like quality distributed leadership means sort of overhauling your management handbook, right? And part of that is obviously about building a solid remote toolkit. And we think that a time management tool like Beeble can make up an important part of that toolkit for some teams, along with our partners today, which is Receipt Bank, Remote, and Process Street. They all offer fantastic features as well for remote teams. And then of course, the tools that our panelists represent, which I'm sure they'll tell you guys a little bit more about as well. So I'll be dropping links in the chat so that you guys can check out those tools and see if and how they might be of value to your remote teams as well. And we're also going to be sending out a couple of discount codes in the coming days, so stay tuned for that. So yeah, I just wanted to take that minute to kind of give a little bit of context to the conversation and give a little bit of context of why Beeple is involved in this conversation specifically. And with that, I will hand it back to you, Laurel, so you can get started.
Thank you so much, Helen. Really, genuinely, thank you for the opportunity to bring these thought leaders together. We really appreciate the leadership that you're bringing to the space, but also creating the space for this conversation. So thank you. We're really excited to be here. And so for those of you that don't know me, my name is Laurel. I am the CEO of Distribute Consulting and the founder of the Remote Work Association. I also write about remote work for Forbes. And so ultimately, I'm just a giant remote work nerd, which is why I am so excited for this conversation today, because we have 4 people and brands that really need no introduction here in the remote space, because they are legendary and they're really pioneering the conversation about not only how to go through a workplace transformation, but more importantly, how to think innovatively about it and how to think ahead about how do we really optimize this as a model. So without further ado, let's bring on our panelists. We'll start with Darren Buckner from Workfrom. Darren, hello. Welcome. And can you give us just your elevator pitch about the beauty that is Workfrom?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's awesome to be here with everybody. I'll apologize a little bit in advance. I've been talking a lot, so my voice is getting a little scratchy. So if I have to clear my throat, please don't take it personally. So Workfrom, we help organizations and individuals really create a sense of place in remote work. We've been doing this for a long time. We've been doing it in a couple of different ways. But right now, we do this by providing these scientifically designed online spaces that often mimic real world places that we know and love to work. So places that inspire us, places that help us peak our productivity. We affectionately call these places virtual cafes. And so if you were to look at anything around Workfrom these days, you'll probably see a lot of buzz and excitement around this virtual cafe experience. We also serve one of the world's largest communities of full-time remote workers. We have over 150,000 members now in our community. And so we've been helping our community with remote work, really from kind of an individual and as well as an organizational level, but really focusing on how to support individuals in this transition to remote work, and also just if you've been working remotely for some time and trying to always better yourself, which is very important.
Amazing. There's such great spaces, and not just physical spaces, but also the space of community that you create for our little world of advocates and digital nomads is fantastic. So thank you for the experience perspective that you bring to the table. We're excited to hear from you. Next, we have Helen Kupp from Slack. Helen, we're so excited to have you here. Slack has been a brand that we've needed at the table for so long in terms of remote work advocacy. And so we're so excited that you and Future Forum are here. So I think we all know about Slack because we all live in Slack all day, every day. But can you tell us a little bit more about Future Forum?
Yeah, I was going to say, what's my elevator pitch for Slack? That would be too long. Hi, everyone. My name is Helen Kupp, and I lead product strategy and partnerships for a new initiative that Slack has launched called the Future Forum. And the Future Forum is really meant to be a consortium of companies and thought leaders and subject matter experts really focus on this topic, sort of defining the future of work. How do we help companies really navigate the shift, especially after everyone sort of got remote kind of pushed onto them? How do we actually take this opportunity and reimagine and rethink what the future of work could look like, whether it's more remote, hybrid, et cetera. And a lot of companies we see are eager to learn from experts like all of my fellow panelists, as well as learn from each other. So Future Forum is meant to be sort of a mix between, think tanky type of research that we are putting out. We put out a very recent research piece called the Remote Employee Experience Index that really helped to survey 9,000 knowledge workers all around the world to understand how the remote work experience was really panning out for folks in the pandemic. And it's a key piece of research that we're going to be continuing to launch so that we see what are the trends, how is that evolving as companies sort of settle into more of a remote work cadence, as well as companies, the impact on employees as companies sort of navigate the what do we do post-pandemic? How do we navigate that? Where's the new normal shaking out to be? And we're pairing that research with events and discussions with our Fortune 500 C-level executives who are really kind of trying to think through what's the best solution here for their employee base. So very excited to take, thought leadership, research, and roundtables and discussions with leaders to actually shape more of this remote work future for some of the largest companies in the world.
Oh, thank you. As a consultant who relies on data and research to provide my clients with the best experience, we are, as a community, are so grateful that you're spearheading that initiative, because we're starting from scratch, right? Like all of the remote work statistics that we had pre-COVID are now pretty much null and void. And so we are so grateful that all of that research is coming about. Thank you so much. Next, we have the poster child, our darling of remote work, if you will, which is Darren Murph from GitLab. GitLab is currently the world's largest organization that is 100% distributed. And so if you feel like you've seen Darren's face everywhere, it's because you have. He is the crown of the crown. So Darren, welcome. And what do you want to tell us about you that maybe we don't already know?
Hey, thanks, Laurel. I appreciate that. Very kind of you. It's awesome to be on a call with another Darren. Love Darren Buckner. So this is awesome. You can call me Murph for short. Things you don't know about me. Well, you can just Google my name. I have a README. We're all about documentation, so I won't bore you with that. 2 factoids. I'm a million miler on Delta. I have 1.2 million miles, and I really, really, really want to fly again. And I actually do have a Guinness World Record. It's actually just out of frame here. I need to work on that. But those are 2. I need 2 truths and a lie. I don't know what the other one would be.
That's a game
I don't
that we
like
can play.
sweet tea. That's the obvious lie.
Oh, and you live in the South. What?
Yeah.
Oh, lie. Got it. I am catching on. Well, thank you. Thank you for having us, or no, for having us. Thank you for joining us is what I meant to say. And we're excited to have you as well. And then last but not least is maybe one of my personal favorite faces in the remote work world is Leah Knobler from Help Scout. Leah is one of the most innovative and creative people you will ever meet in your entire life. And anybody that is looking for like creative culture building ideas or how to engage remote employees, always start with Help Scout in your Google search bar, because the imaginative and incredible results that have come out of Leah's mind are absolutely inspiring. So Leah, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit more about your relationship with remote work at Help Scout.
Wow, Laurel, that was so nice. Thank you.
It's true.
I'm glad this was recorded. I'm gonna watch that back later. Yeah, as you said, my name is Leah. I'm the Director of Talent Acquisition at Help Scout, where I have been now for 5.5 years. So kind of a long time, I guess, in the tech world. And Help Scout makes helpful human customer messaging tools. And we've been remote from day one, so almost 10 years now. And we have about 110 people all over the world.
Fantastic. And honestly, like, I'm not kidding to anybody that's listening, go Google Help Scouts activities. They're incredible, from having fika coffee calls to how they deliver their all hands is so cool. So please go check it out. Now, thank you all again for joining us and for being part of this conversation. Not only are you inspiring thought leaders, but you're also my friends. And so I have been so genuinely excited for this webinar. Like Helen from Beeble said earlier, we were all kind of getting to this point of being webinared out, and we got this invitation. We're like, sure, yeah, cool, another webinar. But man, when we got the energy together in the room and had our prep call, we were like, let's do this. We're gonna have so much fun today. So everybody that is listening, what we want to welcome you into our goals and objectives for this event is, let's have the conversation about remote work that we haven't had yet here in 2020. We've all been talking about it to death, right? Like, how do you measure productivity? How do you build culture? Which tool is the best? Like, we've had those conversations, but what are the conversations that we haven't had yet? So that's the challenge to our panelists today, of like, put your own spin on it. All of those pent up emotions that you've been thinking all year, the questions that you wish people asked, now is the time. Let's talk about it. And this is also a challenge to our participants and attendees. Any questions that you've been wanting to ask that haven't been answered, that have been politely skipped over in Q&As and in other webinars, Today is your day. So pop all of your questions into Q&A and we'll get to those at the end of the day. But let's get started with, you know, some prepped questions for our wonderful panelists. Leah, since I set you up so nicely, you didn't know that I was buttering you up is what I was doing. So you're going to kick us off. So I want to start with this really basic, fundamental, but really critical question that I feel like is the elephant in the room. We all keep talking about how remote work is just work, like this is normal, like you don't need to reinvent the wheel in order to have a successful organization. But here is our world that is in complete shock of, oh, this isn't working, what do we do? So at the root of it all, what makes remote work different than co-located work?
Yeah, great question. I think the big difference I see, and like I think folks notice once they're working for a remote company, is there's a higher level of transparency, thoughtfulness, and intentionality, because great remote companies have to have these things in order to thrive. You can't rely on gathering in the lunchroom or, you know, in the office to share information or to build relationships. So remote companies are spending so much more time thinking about how to do these things in a remote way. You know, how does everyone find the information they need? How are we building trust with our teammates? So I just think remote companies are way ahead of co-located companies in thinking about what processes make sense, like what tools do we need so everyone can find the things they need to find. And hot take, I think remote workers are much better communicators because you have to be and you learn to be, and it's a big way you build trust and is through communication, both verbally, like over Zoom, and so much in writing. So yeah, I think those are the big things I notice.
I agree. And it really puts us into this uncomfortable spot that we want it to be easy. We want it to be a natural transition, that we don't have to make any changes, right? We just change our location. We start working from a different place. But that's the uncomfortable part, is what makes it different is ourselves, how we work, and are we willing to make those changes in order to collaborate effectively with our team in this new environment. Darren, Buckner, what do you think?
Thanks for clarifying that. So, I mean, Leah said it so eloquently, and I think I would just echo everything she just said. I think you have to be much more intentional. I think you have to really build trust and be willing to do what it takes to build trust with your teammates. That's where everything starts. But I also think a lot about the onus being shifted to the individual, to our employees, in terms of environment and supplies and tooling, and even the boundaries have all sort of dramatically shifted over to the plate of the individual in remote work. And I think that's ultimately a good thing. I think it can work very well. But if you are, just getting into remote work or curious about remote work, that is something that people will notice. You have to be able to figure out how to make remote work for yourself. And good leaders will provide guidance. They will provide all the tooling, and certainly will be there to help make sure that iterates and evolves over time. But it does take time, and it is an adjustment. And I think that it is not something you can just sort of flip on and make work. So, we as leaders, we need to be interested in that change. We need to be interested in opportunities to make that easier for our teams. We need to understand that there is a lot that goes onto our teammates' shoulders when we're working remotely, and that our lives are not sort of neat little things we can fit into a box. Most of us, and especially in 2020, we're dealing with a lot. I like to say, remote work in 2020 is not, work as usual. I mean, this is very, very different. There's a lot of change happening for a lot of folks. People are, anxious. They're scared. There's a lot of things that are making its way into our workday, and then make it even harder to control our environment in ways that I think produce some of the best outcomes. So I think a lot about that. And it's like, can we check in often with our teammates? Do we have the right level of empathy? Are we thinking about the change from being in one place where we can kind of control our environment, and we can create culture that over time builds on itself? Like, how can we do that, in a different fashion? It's possible, but we have to ask questions. We have to be curious, and we have to be willing and committed to ultimately bringing our teammates along, and it's not something we can just sort of turn on.
I love that. I love that you just can't turn it on. It does take intention and time and planning. And that's an ironic part of where we all come from as advocates and as consultants and thought leaders is prior to COVID, that was our big message. You have to plan for this. You have to come into this with intention, and here the whole world comes into it completely unexpectedly. So we got a lot of catching up to do. And I think that there's a lot of, well, I want to dig into that a little bit deeper, but I want to put a quick pin in this and take a hot second to say, I want to hear from you guys as participants, as audience members. What do you think? If somebody were to ask you this question, Kaleem, it looks like you kicked us off, but if somebody were to ask you the question in 5 words or less, what is the difference? I don't get it. What is the difference between remote work and co-located work other than an office? What would your answer be? I want to see that chat box fill up with new and inspiring ideas that we haven't thought of. So while those are rolling in, Helen Kupp, I have a question for you. Is we kind of have another awkward elephant in the room, in which Darren's saying, okay, we got to come into this with intention and planning, but we all as thought leaders and as voices that are saying, okay, this is how you make it work, we're all coming from a almost fully distributed work environment in which we are all heavily remote. And let's be honest, that is easier than working in a hybrid work environment. It's easier to be all on site or all distributed. The pain points really exist in the hybrid work environment. And hybrid is going to be the new normal. For people to just overnight become a fully distributed company is not going to happen. Companies are going hybrid more and more and more. The return to office plans are proving this. So I'm curious to hear if you have any insights on that from your research or just personal opinions. What should we be considering, and what pitfalls should we be preventing as people are moving into this more hybrid work environment that's harder than fully on site and fully distributed?
Yeah, you really sort of hit the nail on its head. I always say that, we talk about fully in office, fully remote, and those are arguably just so much easier, right? Hybrid is when, you can be 10% hybrid, 20% hybrid, 80% hybrid. There's lots of variation in what that means for a company, but also it becomes harder because if you think about what we've heard from Darren and Leah so far, making remote work, the best parts of it, require being really intentional. They're about building new habits and new norms and new rituals with each other in terms of how we work together. And if you've ever tried to build a new habit, say like New Year's resolution, trying to work out, get in shape, it's really, really hard. And now imagine trying to build a habit as a group. That becomes even harder. And so what the biggest risk in a hybrid model is that you're going to have people who fall back into like comfortable habits and norms, right? There's like the safe space of, I know the office, that's easy. I used to do that. This Zoom format is really hard, so I'm just going to pop back into the office. And so you actually need to, what we're finding in our research is that a lot of those pain points from just lifting and shifting sort of office culture into Zoom isn't working for a lot of people. It's creating a lot of those challenges. So really being explicit about, same things that you would do when you're going fully remote, like be intentional about what are the sort of different working modes that you want to implement in the company. Be very thoughtful about, continuing to level the playing field and not creating a remote class and an in-office class. How do you actually want to show up together and make sure that access and opportunity is distributed pretty evenly, whether you are working from home or you are seated in the office? So a really great, simple example of that is, we've found a lot of value from our, Denver team and Pune team at Slack, where they used to be the sole teammate on Zoom, dialing into a room full of people in a conference room. Like that was really, really hard. And now that everyone is on Zoom and everyone has their own tile, they've actually felt like more part of the conversation. So maybe that's something that you want to keep post, shifting back to a hybrid, that if you have meetings that are quite large, like make sure people dial into Zoom, make sure everyone has a tile rather than, trying to split, I want, part of the team to be in the office, part of it on Zoom. Start to think about those policies where you want to keep that like level playing field.
Isn't that interesting? I think those of us that are old enough in remote work remember the time when remote first meant you were started as a virtual organization, and then all of a sudden the media got a hold of it and it was like, oh, remote first mentality, and all of us are like, oh, I mean, yeah, I guess that makes sense too. That's a good term too. But yeah, it's shifting. And Leah, kind of reminds me of what you were saying about communication, like shifting our communication style to be all remote first, so that everybody's having equal employee experience regardless of their location, and really shifting how we think about communication. Even in an office, observation is a mode of communication that we use often, especially in onboarding, right? I'm just going to look around and see what's going on, and that tells me how I'm supposed to perform and act when I'm in this culture. And we don't have that mode of communication, so we have to substitute it with other more explicit terms of communication, like you were saying. Like, you got to just talk about it, you got to articulate it, you got to write it down in your handbook. Like, that's such a massive difference. And again, this is where we have that transparent conversation about, we didn't have all of the answers figured out as a remote work community. The nut of hybrid teams and how to perfect those and optimize, we didn't have time to figure that out. Remote work was a tiny incubated conversation, and it exploded into a state of hypergrowth. So there's a lot of problems that we haven't figured out yet. One of those, I think, is payroll and compensation. This is a massive conversation happening everywhere. Like, do we pay everybody the same way or do we not? And whatever. So Darren, I shouldn't say Darren, Murph, I'm going to put you in the hot seat, right? So what are your thoughts on this? And anybody else, you're welcome to chime in, but what do you think about this really controversial topic about global compensation?
Yeah, I think if I would answer this in one sentence, I would say play the long game. If you are a remote leader and you're considering this, it's a long game. It's very expensive to backfill great talent. You want to think about what it says about talent brand, what it signals in terms of allowing remote versus supporting remote. I don't think we have a solid answer to it. The market will determine what the market will determine. So I would say watch this space, but try to be on the right side of history. Play the long game. Don't take short-term cuts just because it looks good on paper. This is about sending the right signal and building a team that feels valued and appreciated.
I love that. I think that's absolutely spot on. And I think all of us need to be willing to be part of the solution, not just asking for a solution, but help us think of it. Like, this is the point that we're at as an industry, is there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of catching up to do, and we all need to be part of thinking through what are the pros and cons and sharing information. I think that's critical. So audience, back to you. Let's fill up the chat again. I want to hear from you about what you think those big questions are, those big elephants in the room are, that are pitfalls of remote work that haven't been figured out yet. Not to say that they're not possible, but maybe you've Googled it to death, or you've asked questions in other webinars or whatever, that you're like, but I still don't understand this. What are those nuts that you haven't been able to crack? I want to hear from you, and maybe we can get to some of them in the Q&A, or if you're brave enough, pop them right into Q&A and ask them to our panelists directly. While we wait for those to come through, let's zoom in a little bit. So we're talking about the big picture of remote work. Let's start to get a bit more tactical for those of us that are, have our pen ready and we want to write down to-do list items. Let's start to talk about our organizations and the infrastructure of remote work within our organizations. Helen, obviously Slack is the spine of many, many, many virtual infrastructures and digital toolkits. So I want to start with you. What common mistakes do you think that people are making when they're starting to build that digital toolkit and really putting together the systems that they need in order to unify their distributed team members? What mistakes are you seeing out there?
It's a great question. So, with Slack, I think it as a platform, we have an opportunity to be sort of that digital headquarters that, stitches together lots of different tools and communication streams and all of that. Honestly, I think the biggest mistake that I often see is, the tools that we use absolutely shape the way that we work together, whether or not we realize it. I used to do consulting in another life, and I still remember this case about grocery store layouts and how aisles were constructed to a certain way to make sure that you were seeing certain foods at certain eye levels. The sugary cereals were lower because all the kids would get to it. And so like our space, whether it's in digital or physical, really shaped the way we work together. And so the biggest mistake is often thinking about tools as separate from, thinking about the intentionality around like, how are you going to work together? What are the ways that people will congregate? What are the kind of like, is it around projects? Is it around, groups? Is it around teams, et cetera? I think it is much more important to define, how you want to communicate, how you want to work together, set those policies, and then think about the tools that kind of fit those needs. Classic product management skill set as well. And I think underneath all of that also, another thing is that for those who are moving into hybrid, we've used the office as a crutch for the most part. It's like it's a hammer. It's a way to think about it is the office is another tool in your arsenal. It's another piece of the infrastructure. So as you're thinking about how to set up just your general virtual or physical infrastructure, what are these different tools playing a role in? What do you want them to do? When does it make sense to be in the office? Is it for team building and collaborative exercises? And when does it make sense to pull things into digital? And I would say the final thought here is, everything that I've heard so far and the experience so far tells me that remote work lives and dies on the flow of information. And so when thinking about virtual infrastructure, it's really important to really bias on solutions that increase transparency and information sharing, not decrease it. That way you actually foster access to information, opportunity, and are able to really stitch a wide variety of people and locations together.
Absolutely. I feel like I'm starting to repeat that maybe on a daily basis when people are like, oh, it's just, remote work is a free for all. And I'm like, no, we have more structure within remote work than a co-located organization. It's just different boundaries. Boundaries in an office are geographic boundaries or boundaries around time. In remote work, we have to draw boundaries around information. And it has to be crystal clear, and so that information is moving seamlessly around people that have no proximity to each other. So thank you for drawing attention to that. Darren?
Yeah, it's such a fascinating topic, and I think a lot about the infrastructure for remote work. And I think it's fair to say, we've done a good job of solving a lot of the early challenges with remote work, especially around logistics, information sharing. I mean, the tools that are out there now are just so much better than they used to be. I am old enough to remember what remote work used to look like 10 years ago or better. I won't say how long, but it used to be a real struggle just to get that information flow in a way that everybody had, that everybody could benefit from, that was accessible, that sort of memorialized things in the right way and it wasn't too temporal. I mean, there was a lot of problems, and now we have such great tools for that, and a lot of those tools are represented here. But it's kind of level one still. We're now iterating on a lot of those tools. There's more to come. There's more promise here in the future. We have the ability to still create more tools and more experiences that are going to take us from that level one into the to the next levels. I think if we're not careful as remote teams, as hybrid teams, as leaders who are helping to create guidance for these experiences, if we're not careful, we make remote work too 2D. It's too flat in some ways. It's too transactional, or it can be. And I think there's an opportunity for remote work to also bring more dynamicism to our organizations, more accessibility. Bring more things to the plate than just the information flow. That is super critical. But we can't forget about the people on the other side of the laptop. And we can't forget that those folks need to have the support in order to do their best work. That's what we all want, right? That's what we all want as an organization, is our people being able to do their best work. And remote work brings that promise to bear. It does help people find their flow. It helps them find, in many cases, their best way to work. And so we want to augment that. And that's a tension, it's a challenge, but I think we've got a lot ahead of us. And so infrastructure-wise, I'm super excited about these next generation experiences and tooling and whatnot that are coming out and that will yet to become possible. I think that's where we start to really make some big gains.
I love this. In fact, let's open this up to all four of you. Where do you think that we're going to see the most innovation in terms of just topics, HR topics, or in tools? Where do you think you're going to see the most innovation in 2021 and beyond when it comes to remote work? Darren, and Murph's got a big smile on his face.
Yeah, Murph's got a big smile on his face. I want to say rapport and travel as cultural leverage. So rapport. One of the questions you're hearing is, how do I build rapport with someone I've never met before in person? And you look at companies like Psych Insights, they're developing a Slack plugin where at a glance, you can look at any colleague anywhere in the world and tell if they're red, yellow, green today, how many meetings they've been in, maybe what their personality type is, how they like to be engaged or how they like to be told no. This is groundbreaking. And this will actually improve cohesion and discipline in teams, even if some of those people go back into the office. This is additional transparency and how what makes us all individuals and how we can work better together. So I think that's going to be a huge theme in 2021 and beyond. The second is travel for cultural leverage. I do think business travel will dip. You might not fly 18 hours round trip for a 2-hour meeting, but you might do that to meet with your team once or twice or 4 times a year. I'm really excited at the notion of co-working experiences and using travel as cultural leverage and building rapport. I think that's going to be awesome. Give teams a poll. We pick somewhere on the globe every quarter or every month. I really hope that leaders invest in this and recognize that travel is now going to play a very different but very important role with people having fewer opportunities to see each other in person on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. And the economic development that comes along with that, being able to move economic impact to where it's needed. Like, come on, that's, gives me shivers. I love it. Leah.
Well, here's my personal hope. I hope to see more companies and products think of ways to create shared experiences in remote ways. So, since we're not getting together as much, since we're not traveling, and who knows when that resumes, you've seen a lot of, I think, event companies try to pivot to figure out, okay, what do we do now? How do we do this over Zoom? And I just want to see more of that. We've pivoted our company retreats to be virtual. And so we're always looking for, all right, what's an experience we can do with our whole team, either, over Zoom or asynchronously, but in our homes. And it takes a lot of creativity to figure that out. But, we've had a lot of fun with, virtual wine tastings. I don't know if everyone's heard of Goat to Meeting, which I just think is hysterical, but it's it's a farm nonprofit, and they'll dial in on Zoom to your meeting and show you their farm animals. And so you can ask all these questions about a goat. And I just love that. Having a goat on this call right now would be amazing. It just changes things up and breaks, the Zoom fatigue we all have. So I hope to see more, products and ideas of things that we can all do together but apart.
I love that. And now I have regret. Why isn't there a goat on this video? How did we miss this opportunity?
I'm writing this down wait, I got to get a goat on the next meeting. This is
yes,
has to happen.
I highly recommend it.
Amazing. Helen, what do you think about innovation in 2021?
Oh, I want to echo all the sentiments around just rapport and creating moments, shared experiences and shared moments. Especially because I think, so in our research, when we looked at, how people were feeling about remote work compared to the office experience, almost every dimension was better. Productivity, work-life balance, satisfaction with work arrangement. The only thing that was worse than the office was sense of belonging and the ability to actually build relationships and connect, build trust. And so I do think that that's a ripe area for us to say, how can we actually use technology to improve, trust and relationships and connections? because the possibility is there, right? Like you are getting a view into my home and my life that you wouldn't if you were working with me in the office. And there's so much more that we can do here. Like we used a donut plugin in our Slack where, we will bring a random lottery group of people together to just chat and get to know each other, that, people who might not work together regularly. And you might say that in the office, you kind of have that over the coffee room, but this actually it gives us an opportunity to go deeper, to actually have more conversation than like, hey, how's the coffee today? Like it's very, you can do more with that. And I'm very excited to see more technology in that space.
I love it. Absolutely. Heather's asking about more information about Donut. I think it's donut.ai. It is a staple in the remote work world. It creates this spontaneous interaction that kind of replicates like bumping into somebody in the hallway. And you just randomly get paired with somebody else and have a great conversation about anything other than work. And it's so great. And there's a billion Slack bots out there and more on the way that will help see this. So audience, what is coming. I want to hear from you about what tools you think we should know about, like cool tools that you've seen popping up on your radar that you think that the remote work thought leaders should know about and pay attention to. We're always looking out, but crowdsourcing is always more effective. And also, what do you think either the needs are or the hopes are for innovation in remote work in 2021 and beyond? I want to hear all of your thoughts. We sincerely read all of these comments and love them. So please participate with us. I'm actually going to go rogue now. Let's go off script. Let's ditch the rest of our agenda. These were great questions that we had planned, but folks, it's time to roll up your sleeves and let's get serious, because there are some incredible questions that are coming through in Q&A, and this is what this webinar is supposed to be about. Like, let's get to the meat of remote work and solve some problems together. So let's start with this massive elephant in the room, like we were talking about before. Balancing, Karen's works at a university and is talking about the balance of people that have to be on site and the people that can be remote. And we're seeing this across all industries, right? Healthcare, manufacturing. How do we solve this problem? And how do we message our solution of, yes, there's going to be people that need to continue to work on site. How do we enable more work from home without creating a problem in our social infrastructure of blue collar, white collar? There's privilege and discrimination that happens for people that are entitled to certain privileges and some people are not. What do we do about this problem? Open floor. Murph.
Yep, I'll go for it. I actually think I try to frame everything of opportunity instead of scarcity. I mean, the truth is there's been a subset of the world working remotely for a really long time already. And I actually think that coming out of COVID, this will greatly democratize remote work and will make it easier for more people than before to work remotely. So people that have been historically ostracized from the workplace, working parents, elder caregivers, military spouses, these people generally had to choose between a co-located job or their family. Now, hopefully for many more of them, they will have remote opportunities. For those that do have to go to a co-located role, my hope is that they'll be competing with fewer resources for room on the subway or room on a highway, and hopefully their quality of life, even in the commute, will improve. But also look at the career pathing options. If you are currently in a role where it's co-located, you were probably going to be there forever. But now, even in manufacturing, perhaps you can get promoted into a role that's more supervisory, where you might spend some time on the warehouse floor, but you get some additional flexibility as you get promoted. So I don't think we'll ever completely equalize roles that have to be done on site and those that can be done remotely. But I think it opens up a lot more opportunities for people to get promoted into spaces where added flexibility is possible if outright remote isn't.
Yeah, I love what Murph. Oh, sorry, Helen.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll be quick. I love what Murph is saying here, and I think I also look at this in terms of opportunity versus scarcity in many ways. There are some harsh realities I think that we need to be real about. Like not everybody is going to be able to experience the benefits that can come from remote work. And I mean, full stop. And that will be the case, I think, for certainly all of our lifetimes. But it doesn't have to be. It doesn't mean that we can't value the work, equally. And I think it starts with values. It starts with us changing our culture around remote work and co-located work, and making sure that we are not creating these deficits or these disparities that don't necessarily need to be there. What we have seen over the last year, I believe, is a cultural shift. And so this provides a lot of opportunities for folks who haven't been able to benefit from remote work or find their path with remote work. Hopefully now those barriers have been dropped or have been removed in many ways. Hopefully we don't have the same kind of cultural challenges and understanding that remote work can work for a lot of people who maybe we didn't think it could work for before. And so that will provide progress. And then I think just having more people working this way, one of the things that we're good at is adapting. That's what we do. That's what we're good at as humans. We adapt, right? And so I think just more exposure to this kind of work is going to beget more innovation, more progress. And so I'm excited about that opportunity. I want to see, marginalized communities be able to benefit from some of this stuff. I want to see all the groups that Darren Murph just mentioned. Let's get more and more people into these things. Let's get more and more people breaking the norms and figuring out what the new normal should be, because that's where we're going to get it. It's not going to happen on this panel. I want a lot of the answers to come, here, and I think we're all a part of it, and I know we will continue to be that. But it's just we need more exposure, more people doing it, and more ideas, more hope, and more cultural change.
Yeah, I wanted to just add that we talked a little bit about how remote work lives and dies on information flow. In the past, before remote work became normal during the pandemic, if you were in manufacturing, if you were a nurse or a doctor working in the hospital, you actually probably didn't have access to more of the information around corporate or what those opportunities were, what's the latest on the business, et cetera. And so we actually have an opportunity with remote to democratize information and make it more available, whether you are in office or whether you are working from home or working from a co-working space. And that I think will start to open up more opportunities over time. I think that it is a false statement to believe that things were super equal even before we had more prevalent remote work. And I think the other thing too, the flip side is true. We talk about how some people are required to work in office, but what I've been hearing a lot from executives in Fortune 500 companies is this concern that the sort of first-class employees will be able to work in the office, and folks who are remote in different locations are going to feel really isolated and disconnected from what's happening. And there is a risk, right? If all of your C-suite and executives are still coming into the office in San Francisco, in New York, wherever, and working 9 to 5 in a physical location, it's going to feel like you have to do that too to access growth opportunities. So it's just as important for the other side of this, which means your executives have to walk the talk. It's just as important to say, if remote is a thing that you want to make work, if hybrid is a thing you want to make work, distribute your executives via geography and availability just as equally as your employee base. Otherwise, you're signaling the complete opposite if you don't.
Let's zoom right into that, because there's a lot of questions about this, about managers across the board and in a variety of perspectives. But how do we deal with this situation where there is traditional leadership that's saying, no, this is not possible? This has always been a concern, right? Creating a case for change that says, oh, yes, there are benefits to the organization for this, and maybe you should consider them for whatever reason. But now we're up against this societal change in which it is going to cause discrimination and hypergrowth of some industries and not of others. And it's a whole different ballgame now. So how do we have this conversation with managers that either we need to open our minds and consider this as an option, or we need to do it better? I'm having problems. I'm feeling isolated that's not necessarily your fault, but I would like to request a solution, right? Like, how do we open this conversation with either direct management or executive leadership?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to have much of a choice. We've catapulted well beyond the petty arguments of is remote good or bad. It is happening to your industry. So there will be a big litmus test on the companies that say, you know what, this is happening. We're going to use this opportunity to build remote fluency and build remote infrastructure. And we're going to be a more inclusive, more flexible, more efficient team on the other side of it. I would say for individual contributors in an organization, there's only so much you can do to get really good at remote before you need your leadership to open up the second gate and let you run the rest of the way. And a mentor once told me, you can stick one oar in the water off of a yacht and paddle really hard to try to get it to go in a certain direction. But at some point, you might need to get off the yacht and hop in a canoe where you have a lot more control over where that direction is taking you. I do think we'll see a lot of shifting sands coming out of this, where people recalibrate and find companies that align with the new culture that is going to drive them in a direction that is suitable for them. And I think for companies that just try to ignore this and keep their head in the sands, the market will tell them otherwise sooner rather than later. For companies that really embrace this and they lean into documentation, it won't take long before there's compounding interest on how they're able to scale that knowledge. And competitors in their space that did not invest in that, they'll have a tough time keeping up.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts?
I think Murph mentioned this in chat at some point, but we all need to recognize that these are new skills for all of us to develop. There is certainly more of an openness to empathy and listening to the well-being of your team, but we have to be upskilling our managers, training kind of our leadership to be able to have these conversations, to be able to think differently about how to support their teams and their organizations. It would be silly to say we're trying to do all of this without some sort of training or support. All of it is so new.
Yeah, L&D leaders out there, consider spinning up a course on unlearning, literally
Yes.
teaching people to not do the things they've done in the past, teaching them to share early and often instead of holding things until they're polished, working with a low level of shame. You have to unlearn a lot. And so if you're thinking, hey, we need a course on unlearning, you're already moving in the right direction.
I completely agree. In fact, who's the author of the book Unlearn? I met him. Anyway, I'm trying to give proper credit where credit is due, but there's the book Unlearning, and I feel like he was very taken off guard when the remote work world just kind of like latched onto him. We're like, we love you, and he's like, oh, I didn't make this connection. So yeah, there's a lot of work to do there. Let's actually take that conversation one step further about how to have very, very sensitive conversations with our managers. Like, I feel discriminated against. This is diversity, equity, and inclusion is a big conversation that's happening because people are being professionally scrutinized in their safe place at home. And they're really struggling with that. Or I'm burning out, I need help. Like, how do you, one of our panelists, or I'm sorry, one of our attendees was asking about more of those emotional intelligence wellness topics that are much more vulnerable and not necessarily, business objective related to bring up. Leah, what do you think about that? How should we bring that up?
Yeah, that's so real, especially in 2020. I think what we've been doing at Help Scout is just a lot of support for our managers and reminders to say, check in with your players. That's what we, refer to our individual contributors as, but just doing player check-ins. And really it's on managers to notice, like, to build trust and get to know these people, to say like, oh, you know what? Leah hasn't really been participating in Slack the way she used to. Like, there become, I think, new signals to look out for in a remote company of like when maybe someone's not doing okay, that you don't have the same thing in an office. So, just like getting to know people's sort of rhythms and routines in Slack, how they participate, sort of what their work, where it shows up, and just being vulnerable and managers opening up first. I think like that's such a beautiful thing too, is that we're all people. Managers aren't robots. So like, make yourself vulnerable. You're allowed to share with your direct reports that you're having a hard time. And another thing is we've been, really intentional about talking about self-care and showing what that looks like. Like, I am a huge proponent of therapy, and I have therapy every week, and I put it on my calendar, and I make a Slack status, and I'm very public about it because there is no shame. And we even have an emoji in Slack that is the cutest watering can that's watering itself, and it's called self-care. So like, how cute is that? But like, when people have that on now, I notice it means they're probably in therapy, or maybe they're doing yoga. But it just starts to normalize that. And then also what I love is we've been giving self-care days off. I know everyone can, take days off, but when everyone else is kind of doing work, it feels sometimes hard to be fully unplugged. So we just shut it down for everybody in the company. We just had one last Friday. I think we're going to continue doing that. It's just, little things you can do along the way to signal that this company cares, we're trying, we know we're all feeling that burn. So.
I'm gonna plus one the custom emojis, and also a plug for like Slack custom statuses. When the pandemic started, we actually added custom statuses like caregiving, or things like that actually show like, hey, we want you to be open about these more sensitive topics. Like, we want you to be open about where you are as a human and as a parent, or whatever, and using your tools in that way to make it easier for people to just say like, hey, I need a little something more today, is a great way to do that.
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit to this, and it's something that's certainly near and dear to our team, and I believe that the best remote friendly teams, they get this intuitively, or they work hard to make this work. So you want to do a couple things specifically. You want to be very intentional about checking in, certainly, but you got to go even a little further. You have to build it into the actual workflow. We do a meeting every week where we don't talk about anything related to work at all. It is literally just a call to see you, see how you're doing. It's the red, green, yellow. And anything else that may be top of mind that, again, doesn't have anything to do with work, and we keep the work stuff out of it, and we're very vigilant about that. Also, create a budget for health and wellness, put money to it. As leaders, I think it's really important that we also show that we are willing to value it at that level. So, have some sort of a health and wellness budget, whatever you want to call it, make it super available for your teammates to use, and celebrate that. So when they do use it, and you use it yourself, and when other people use it, make that a great thing. Endorse that, celebrate that, clap. We also have in our Slack, we have a life shares channel, and we share cupcakes. We can share all kinds of stuff in there, but we also share when we're not feeling so great, or when something didn't go amazing. When a teammate had a tragic thing that had happened to one of his spaces that he was working on. We all saw it, and we all empathize, and we all were there, as much as we could be. And I think it's really important to expose us, leaders, but also every teammate, to the things that are up and down in your life. The more we can bring humanity to this way of work, the better off we're all going to be. We're now all seeing our homes. Somehow I didn't get the memo about guitars in the back. I've got to work on that. But we're all seeing our homes. We're seeing how messy this can be. This is us, right? This is us. And we need to embrace it and go further with it. And I think that this is our big opportunity as leaders, but also just in this cultural shift to make this a better place for everybody.
Oh, I, for one, am so glad that this was recorded, because I'm going to be watching this over and over. Like, there were so many incredible moments of inspiration and just validation for us as a community. Like, yes, this is hard. Yes, there is work to do. Let's do it together. So I actually want everybody to think about that. Like, yes, it would be great to discuss this as a team, but we are out of time. So that can be your call to action for today, is there was a question about head of remote, right? Darren is the famous head of remote. Head of remote is definitely an up and coming title for a lot of organizations, but how are you going to be a head of remote? All of us that are here, if you are in this webinar, you are a remote work advocate, and we need you to build this community and to help figure out the solutions and the problems that we have been thinking about and talking about for this entire time. So write it down, share it, email us, post it on social media and tag us. Like, what are you going to do to help build the remote work world in 2021 and beyond? It's not just a want, it's a need. There's so much work to do. So how are you going to be ahead of remote in your career and in your lifestyle? Thank you so much to all of you for joining us, to our panelists for their incredible perspectives and thought leadership, and to Beeble for hosting us today. We really, really appreciate all of your participation, even if we did not see your face on the screen. We loved reading your comments in the chat box and your ideas and suggestions. We're so excited to go back through those and learn more from you. So thank you all. So wonderful to have you here. We appreciate you, and best of luck in surviving the rest of 2020.